Hey everybody, it's been a long time since we have done one of these. Actually, it's been many years. So I've got some time tonight and thought I would use this to accomplish a number of objectives. So we're going to talk about and walk you through a sequence that I traded earlier here on the NKD. So my intentions here tonight, and it's about 11:30 p.m. on Wednesday, February 7th. If you look at the clock in the lower right-hand corner, the sequence took place at just around 9 p.m. So it was a couple of hours earlier. And so my intentions here basically are to help myself stay in rhythm, help myself to stay in the rhythm of the markets, allow me the opportunity to go back and audit myself, critique myself in terms of a trade sequence, allow you to look over my shoulder, and also share with you some of the tools I have. One of my challenges in recent months has been non-market obligations and trying to find opportunities during the after-hours session and during the RTH when I am able to trade without forcing things. So the one good thing about the volatile markets is that typically there's some good carryover into the Asia sessions and the Europe sessions. Regardless, you always have the transition periods between the continents, which are always fertile in terms of setups and efficiencies, and I know we've talked about that in the past. But here we are. It's a fairly volatile market. We're coming off of a day where the U.S. Market closed weak. And typically, the expectation is for the Asian markets to continue that weakness up until Europe open. Then Europe usually starts taking us up. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. But essentially, here's my screen, and we are trading NKD. And a couple of things I'll point out here: the chart package on the left is a Sierra chart platform. With some overlay programming, some proprietary programming that Kim has done, and I'm working with him on that. He's incorporating some things that I've asked for in addition to some of the things that he's been doing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the domes right now, these particular domes are TOS, Thinkorswim. TD Ameritrade. So normally they're to the right-hand side. You see two domes. What I've just done is I've overlaid the NKD chart on top of the Sierra charts. I want to keep it a little bit closer to the chart and allow me to focus a little bit better. So let's set the stage here. I am trading and expecting a breakdown. And that breakdown, again, is based on the close of the U.S. markets, and it's also based on the set of indicators that I've got here. So counterclockwise top left, you've got the day, 60-minute, 15-minute. Middle of the screen's a 5-minute chart with typical bars up top, a modified MACD signal in the middle, and what I'll refer to as an algo center in the bottom. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically that takes a number of proprietary indicators and will allow us to determine how strong or how weak a market is on various time frames at a glance. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm playing for a down move. Top right above that, by the way, would be a cum delta. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That's in the blog. Lots of good information about that. Suffice it to say that that uses a very tight Tilson moving average, 3-minute moving average, and the color coding in the background is red or green, depending upon which direction the market is moving. I find that to be a little bit better even than a 3-line break pure price chart, because it's actually based on contracts going off in the ask or the bid and tells you who's the aggressor. So essentially, you see I've got a short position continuing to scale in 15 short. You see a negative on the day here, and that negative really is a result of an earlier short sequence attempt at about 8:30. So I'll call it 20:35 on the chart there. You see that breakdown attempt, and I had all my signals to my liking confirming my bias. And you'll see the algo center. All of those rows were red, and the rows, without getting into all the detail, basically they look at the cum delta chart. They look at some other proprietary indicators. They look at the smaller time frames, higher time frames. As you go down the grid toward the bottom, you're looking at higher time frames. So it's nice when everything's aligned. Sometimes it's a little bit of a delay in the signal, but it's certainly confirmation if you're in the middle of managing a trade sequence. And you can see that went all red there for a bit, and then we turned back up. You see cum delta turned up green, the 1 minute chart turned up green, so I decided to scratch it, take the hit. But now it starts to reassert itself, and certainly I want to give the standard disclaimer: past performance is not indicative of future results. I can screw trades up with the best of them, but this is helping me get my discipline back in terms of some of these helpers, if you will. So the idea is, again, to go for a continuation. Now, we're still trading in the initial balance. We're still in the first hour range, and we're a couple hours in the trading day. So a lot of head fakes both ways. Another reason where I figure that, once everybody gets so aggravated about, which direction it's heading, a bit oversold short term, but you can see the longer time frames do suggest a continuation down. But once everybody gets all frustrated, that's when the market usually makes its move. So, just going to stay with it. Didn't pay on that first one, and we'll see if this pays. Obviously, I know after the fact that it will, but I want to use this as an opportunity again for myself to critique the trade here. Things I did well, things that I can improve. And just follow along with me. So what am I here? I'm short 18 contracts. I do have my P&L up. I know a lot of folks will tell you not to do that. You can see the open P&L to the right-hand side of the dome and the cum for the day up top. I do use that because I think it's important for me to remember that this is about getting paid, and it's about minimizing costs. So it is important to me to at least be aware of it. Not that it should dictate your trading. You should trade as if it's not there. You should trade as if, market doesn't care whether you're up or down. As long as you can filter that out, I use it as a bit of a governor, if you will, to remind myself that we are talking about real money here. And as long as you don't get emotional about it, make decisions just based solely on that, I think you're fine. So anyway, the idea here is to go for a break. So what am I looking at? I got cum delta that's turned back red. I got my bar chart 1 minute turning down, my 5 minutes turning down. I got MACD below the zero line, right? I was trying to get a downturn going. I've got my algo center, that lower grid, the 6 or 7 row grid, all going red. So now I've just got to be patient. You will notice in a lot of cases, well, the Nikkei is a bit of an odd animal if you're not familiar with it. It's got a very spurty rhythm. It'll pause and then move, pause and then move, and you get a lot of that sort of action. Now I'm short 22, but I'm going to start covering some of this. A couple of reasons. I want to respect the push to the lower day. I'm still expecting an IB break. But I want to respect the fact that it could hold. I also want to end the day profitable. I want to end the day with some positive momentum, possible positive personal psyche. Again, feeling good about myself, feeling good about my rhythm. So you'll see me scale in and out of here as I normally do. I'm not an all-in, all-out person. One shot in, one shot out. I think that's suggesting that you can time things fairly perfectly, and I just don't feel that that's. It doesn't suit my style. It might work for you, just doesn't suit my style. So, in hindsight, you may say, well, get that short on and then just hold the target. And I know some very good traders that do that. I'm going after some meat here. And I'm trying to get my size down too. 20 contracts on the Nikkeis. It's pretty standard for me, but it's arguably a bit on the heavy side. It's a fairly thin product. Not that it should make much of a difference, because if you're on the right side, you're putting someone else on the wrong side with your entries. But somewhat sensitive to where we're at. So you'll see my cursor bobbing up and down here in terms of things I'm looking at. You see, I've got buy orders down to cover below the market in case we do get that push down. I've got one just above low of day, and I've got one below there. As we're approaching, I am taking some more off, so we're down to 14. Still have a pretty good size on, but again, I want to respect the fact that we're approaching prior lows. We might just get a poke. I don't know if we're going to get much more continuation. I think so, but it's really hard to tell. So I am being prudent, I think, in covering this. In hindsight, could have paid more if I didn't do that. But looking at it again, I'm okay with how I manage this. Again, delta top still red. We got bar chart fine MACD turning back down. I like that. I like the fact that the algo center is all red. Again, looking at various things, you could the top row of that, for example, is linked to the delta chart up top. So you've got basically the way to look at that is red is all bearish and blue is bullish, and if you've got a mix, it's a bit tough. Sometimes again it takes a little bit of a lag to get it all the way that you want. For example, if you just get in right now or even a minute or two ago, you're probably in a little bit late. So I like the fact that this is a confirming indicator for me. The top rows typically go first, and then the lower ones fill in. Or you could have a market in a longer term trend where the lower ones are already set, and the upper ones, the lower time frames, are kind of flipping around, and they'll join the lower ones. But I found this to be a really good visual. That at a glance you can really tell without looking at a bunch of different charts. You can tell what's happening on multiple time frames, and that's also. It's not linked right now, but it can be linked to auto executions, and that's where I'm working at right now, or working on with Kim in terms of getting that going. So you'll see me futz around here a little bit, trying to get the domes back on. I don't think there's an always on top feature for TOS, so anytime I'm clicking in the charts, that's going to disappear a little bit. So what's happening here? Market's popping up a little bit. I've got myself a little bit lighter. I covered at 740, 725, 735. We're back up to 745. It looks like a retracement in a bear trend where it might be another entry possible here. If I weren't in a position, could I re-enter? This is essentially the inverse of what we saw this morning with the U.S. markets, where ES moved up strong, pulled back, and if you weren't in a position, or even if you were in a position, you could have added, either established or added to your position. And you'll see here in a little bit, I'm waiting somewhat to make sure this isn't going to just take off back to the upside on me, bounce or just probe that low of day. But basically, I'm looking for this thing to hang and confirm. And I think I'm going to end up putting another 3 on at some point. But I'm just waiting here. I still like my Hume Delta. I still like my MACD. I still like the algos, all red. Scanning the charts, I feel that's the polar path of least resistance. And you'll actually hear, I think, in the background, a ticker I use, Tick Strike. That's that little square on top of the account statement, lower right-hand side. Both a visual and an audio cue. I do like that. It uses another sense so that you can maximize your senses. I found the older I get, the more that I need to somewhat automate and certainly have some helpers out there that help me get out this night, especially if my focus is diverted, which is my big challenge right now. I've got to get to a point where, as I said in my post a few days ago, of just being focused on the market. So, the time is limited. There will be time soon when I'll be back at this 100%, but right now I've got to maximize the opportunity when it's there. I've said before that one of the things I do is I press when it's not there, so I end up forcing things, and that's not a good way to go at this. So, trying to combat that a little bit. What else can we talk about here? A quote board lower right, just looking at the ES and the and NQ, just to kind of get a gauge on what that looks like. to set the larger perspective. Again, this is a trader who's trying to get himself out of a slump, and this is as much for me as it is for anyone looking over my shoulder. So I just want you to, understand what I look at. There's obviously no perfect method. There's no perfect screen combination. I've always been a believer in multiple time frames. What I like about the current setup, it's very similar to how I've always traded, and my screens you see there is adding another 3 short, 725, getting back up a little bit to 14. Not going crazy here, but we get a little bit of a confirmation down out of the bear flag when I put a little bit more in. Still have my covers down below. But again, what I'm trying to do here is basically, get myself back in rhythm. So, we were minus 2 or 3K earlier, getting back up into, half decent profit execution, profit realization, I should say. Charts, Delta again red, getting the continuation. Do we just poke here? Do we continue? Hard to tell. MACD's coming down. That MACD keeps coming down. I referenced it a few minutes ago, by the way, that very similar to how the screens I've always used. Just a couple of tweaks. I like the fact that I can look at this grid in the Algo Center and just be able to basically see 9 charts at once. And it's very, very helpful for me rather than scanning all over the place. So I just kind of keep looking at that, and I keep looking at Cum Delta. You see I'm circling what I'm looking at. This was what I was doing at the time because I knew I was probably going to be talking about this later. Still short 11, market coming down. Again, buy orders underneath. Gonna lighten up here a little bit. So that ad at 725 gave me a what I call a mini outlier. Those that work with me in the past understand that it's all about increasing momentum, increasing profit momentum to the extent possible. It's easy to get lighter as a trade is moving in your direction. If you've got the confirmation, the best thing you can do is get heavier. Admittedly, I'm doing both here, so they're a bit in conflict. But late in the day, I'm a little careful with a Nikkei. It's on the thinner side, so I'm a bit more cautious there than I might be on something like ES. So you'll see me, I don't want to say taking quick profits, but basically ensuring that I'm not going to lose, in this sequence. So we've got it locked in. We're up above 4K. I think getting anywhere between 4 and 6 right now would be acceptable. I'd be willing to let this trade go against me with a lighter size once we get near the profit targets, and we're kind of getting there. There's the poke down below. Again, I'm all red here, so I think I've got potential. I'm getting the extension down. I am respecting the prior day, and this chart, by the way, has the Nikkei hours. So you see the prior day in terms of the Nikkei's trading hours. That around 21.6 is going to be the prior low for that trading day. Okay, so I want to respect that as we poke toward that. You see I covered a little bit more at, 685, down to 6. See if we get any surges down. This is where I'm getting close to wanting to really bank everything. We're getting up above 5. If I can end around 5, I'm good on this. If I see MACD continue to come down and price stalling, I'm going to want to be careful here. And by the way, this is a 30-minute video, and I'm only 19 minutes into it, so we'll try to fill the space here a little bit. A bit of a pause here will provide a little bit of liquidity. If people want to sell me at 660, I'll take that. I'll still put my other buy orders down below. And what I'm looking to do is get this automated. I'm really looking to get this automated because I found that as I've gotten older, the discretionary processes, which I am still a big believer in because I do believe that that's important, that you use the market judgment, market intuition to make decisions. But I've also found that if you're unfocused and certainly the older you get, the brain's not as sharp as it once was. So I'm looking to automate a little bit of this. Again, working with the programming folks to make that happen. So this is, what I'm looking at here. Again, very, very similar dashboard that I've always used, incorporating the same techniques that we've always talked about. Nothing's changed there, but a couple of tweaks. The Delta chart, which I incorporated a few years ago, and MACD. I've often said it doesn't matter what momentum index you use, whether stochastic, MACD, or anything else. Just pick one. It doesn't matter whether you use a ruler, tape measure, yardstick. Just find a measurement. And one tweak I've made is that I like the visual, and there are little tricks that you can use in terms of where those little balls or BBs or tennis balls, whatever you want to call them, where they are in approximation to the standard MACD line. So there's some modifications there. So I like that. Today, by the way, I changed my dome to a white background. I've been using black for the last couple of years, and I'm just doing some things to mix up the brain, to reboot the brain, especially coming off of Monday, as I talked about in the video earlier tonight. So where are we at here? Down to 4. And now we're starting to bounce off of that. Okay, so we're starting to we probe down below. We're getting down toward the prior low a day, and I want to get pretty light here. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm down at 2, and basically keeping an eye on Delta. Delta I found to be one of the best indicators out there. And if you can incorporate that with anything else that you're using, I tell you, it's a great confirmation. It's a great visual. You see, I'm looking at the two low spots there. I've always taught about the ideal price objective is the retest of the prior swing high or low. If you're going for extension, great, but please be aware of the larger time frames. I am leery that we have somewhat oversold conditions on the larger time frames after the capitulation the other day and the breach of liquidity. So I'm not expecting this thing to fall completely out of bed. If it does, it's going to go without me, and then I'll take a retrace short entry again. But that was the thought process, right or wrong on this. Again, it's not intended to cherry pick, but it's really, trying to look at a sequence. It's a different market. We've never talked about the Asian markets before. There's a very distinct rhythm between the U.S. market and the Asian market, a very distinct transition period. We've talked a lot about the catcher's mitt opportunities when the U.S. liquidity ends and intraday traders are bailing, usually right into support. We saw that yesterday, by the way, which would have been February 6th market, which was up nicely. If you look at where it pulled back at the very, very end of the day, and I mean 5 p.m. at that session. And then when it opened at 6 p.m., it just shot up about 8 points the minute it opened, and that's because it closed on support. And just get used to those rhythms and get used to extending your time horizon just 1 hour beyond the intraday time frame. That's if you do that, you will be ahead of others, and you will have additional profit opportunities, additional wholesale opportunities to actually be able to get into a trade. So that was a really good example in terms of what happened yesterday. So I've done a lot of work with Asia lately. I'm learning a little bit more about it. I've learned the transitions. Again, that's suited to the time that I'm able to trade right now until that changes. So anyway, we're still down at 2. We're getting a bit of a bounce. MACD, really a bit of a pause. My algos are all red still. Delta's still red, so I'm not going to close the position. But on a retest back down, the idea is to go ahead and close that. I've got the bulk of the profits locked in. I want to certainly keep it a premise-based stop, meaning that as long as the premise remains intact, then I want to, give myself an opportunity. I'm not really a believer in a point-based stop unless the points are based 100% on the premise. And the reason for that is, some people may say, well, I got a 1 or 2 point stop. Well, if you're in early or not at the opportune entry point. The market could go against you 1, 2, well, hell, in this market, 6 points, but your premise is still valid, and you just didn't time it properly. So always try to ask yourself, and I try to ask myself, is my premise valid, and then try to get as optimal an entry as possible. Maybe getting some in as you're approaching support resistance zone, and then putting more in on the turn, getting a little bit more aggressive on that. And that's the rhythm, the cadence that I'm trying to get into. So what do we got here? Market's trying to extend back down. If it does, you see I'm covering one as it approaches low day again. They get one back down in case it does surge through. So 25 minutes into a 32-minute video. What else can we talk about? Been a long time. I had a lot of fun with the Trading After Dark. I know we talked years ago about doing more of those. There was some discussion of actually going network with some of that. Those plans didn't come to fruition. A little bit of work that goes into this. I'm not going to bother with any fancy graphics here. I'll probably load this on the TAD site. But I just want to get this out there for, basically to pick that fun back up again. Give myself an opportunity to critique this trade sequence. What would I do differently here? Always hard to say in hindsight. You don't want to beat yourself up. Maybe a little bit more aggressive on the size. 20, 25 or so. That's okay. If I felt, if I had a whole lot more confidence in that, and if I really felt it, and if I wasn't on the heels of an earlier draw on that first attempt, I didn't want to get stuck heavy again, so or ultra heavy. So I could have done that. In hindsight, it's always easy to say load up if a trade works in your favor. But that's okay. I mean, coming back from -3 or so, was it, to 5, so that's an 8K swing on this particular sequence. I'm all right with that. So market coming back down here. Again, we're narrating to this as a voiceover after the fact. I want to go ahead and take that off, right? Down back to 1. Now, one thing that's catching my eye here, look at Cum Delta up top, right? See if that closes, when that bar closes, as green. And if it does, then I'm going to want to bail on the rest of this. Okay. So just kind of keep an eye on it. So one of the things that I'm looking at doing is certainly resurrecting a trading network. I'm with a great group of guys right now, and I'm there as a silent trader. They don't trade exactly as I do, but they provide a very polished professional environment, and even though we might trade differently, they see things, and it's been an honor, first of all, being there, and it's been a privilege for me and a great thing for me not to have to talk or lead and be the player coach. Just be the player. Listen to people that are in rhythm. Be in that environment and using that to get myself back in rhythm, and then getting back on my own game and my own cadence. And so that's been very, very refreshing. I have a lot of respect for the folks that actually do both. There are times I can, when we do the live jelly classes, I found recently, though, that it's very, very difficult. Maybe it's age setting in or whatever. But that's kind of what's happening now. In terms of this sequence here, again, Cum Delta looks like it's going to close green. We're coming off the low here a bit more, so the idea is to try to bail on this and just close it off. Could it fake here a little bit and then bear flag it down and extend it? Actually could. So in hindsight, since this is a few hours after the sequence, as I'm narrating this, what you're going to realize, and if you look at the charts after the fact, is it actually is going to, I'm going to close it here shortly. It's going to come back down looking as if it's going to extend a bit of a triple bottom action, and then it's going to move up sharply after that. So, in hindsight, I'm okay with managing it. I've got one contract out of what 20 plus that we started with. This thing could go literally 10 points. Is not going to bother me. Although you don't want to get sloppy with small size because that'll be a bad habit that creeps in pretty quick. But the idea for me here is to close this shortly. So we had a couple of minutes left in the recording here. You'll see once I close it off, we'll cut it there. So I encourage you to look at all the Trading After Dark episodes from years past. We'll try to do some more of this. I really want to get back into some of the things that we used to do in years past. Get back to using this blog as a journal. I've tried to do that a little bit in terms of being very open with my challenges, trying to get back in rhythm. The game doesn't change. The rhythms do. You change over time, and I think that's what's happened in my case. I've had Morad talks about this, Futures Trader 71, in terms of habit creep. And my suggestion would be, do some things. Get yourself around traders who are in sync. You see the delta I'm pointing at here, green now. So I definitely want to close this off. Get yourself in rhythm. I appreciate everybody who has been willing to chat with me in the last couple of weeks. It's been very refreshing to know that there's a network of support out there. One of the errors I made early in my career and on this site was trying to do everything on my own and being Superman, and that just doesn't work. You were never meant to live alone, and call it a hard lesson that I've learned over time. So that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. But quick view of how I'm trading. We'll get this automated here a little bit going forward. I'll let you know and show you some of that when it's all set up. My thanks to Kim, who's doing the work with me, and any information you want on that, I'd be willing to share. As Peter says of Shadow Trader, I wish you good trading. It's a lot of fun. So we'll close this off here and call it a night. Last little entry, get flat 5K. I'm good with that. Hit cancel. See, there's the green delta. Don't want to be short. Right. And in hindsight, the market does bounce pretty hard. So hope that helps. God bless you. Have a great night. Take care.